Hi. Welcome to Dose of Deborah Rehab for the Heart. I'm your host, Dr. Deb Howell. Today I'm joined with my special guests, Zissis and Ezriyah, and we are continuing our conversation around love. And just as a reminder for who these gentlemen are, Ezriyah, he's a visionary, he's an author, he's an intuitive paradigm shifter, a chemical poet, a fear release therapy and certified Ho'oponopono. You know what? I'm just going to have you say that again.
Yes. Ho'oponopono.
Yes, practitioner,
Yes.
an energy healer, and soul deep intimacy coach, as well as a metaphysicist and radiological health physicist, and an avid soul surfer.
Indeed.
And Zissis is a consciousness teacher. He's a HeartMath trainer. He's an heart imagery meditation facilitator. And he's an all-around nice guy. So, welcome. So happy to be back to continue this conversation and welcome you here. So hello.
Well, thank you very much for the invite, Deborah. I know that I can't speak for Ezriyah, but I know that both of us collectively, and I myself, are very grateful when we can have really honest and deep conversations like this, because I believe it's in that deep sharing, in that vulnerability that we share, that really begins to connect other human beings with our hearts. That really is what the whole journey is, connecting with each other in a meaningful way, as opposed to finding ways of division. Our whole paradigm has always worked on division. That hasn't worked. Let's find something that, or a lot of things that bring us together as opposed to dividing. So thank
you. Yes. And you
absolutely, that Jesus could certainly speak for me. Jesus could certainly speak for me in this regard. Yes.
So, I wanted to talk about this week where I had a gentleman that I was working with and had a conversation with. He was struggling with pain and some health issues around the same time that he had a major breakup. And this breakup had a lot also to do with the way things transpired. So with respect to not only the relationship between himself and the young lady, but also with there was a person involved who was a friend. So there's other aspects of betrayal and the trust. So you have, it's multifaceted. It became multifaceted. But what was interesting is I felt that much of what he was going through with the physical ailment and the health concern had a lot to do with this emotional, like his immediate, this is what he was like. He was holding, he was upset, and he was hurting, right? He's hurting, deeply hurting. So he asked me, because talking about love, right? Everything, that resonant field of love. Love is a self. Love, the unconditional nature of love, has no agenda. There's no attachment. It is a field. It's open. It's connecting. And we can feel it. We can feel it quite deeply. And so his question to me was, I don't even know how to begin to love myself. Because this also had a history that went back into childhood.
Always does.
Yeah. And so I thought, wow, that would be a great question to ask you guys. Being that you're men on a path for, to explore your own love, self-love, and there are men out there that will be listening to this. And the question is, how did, each of you, get on this path, but looking at beginning to look at yourself in the mirror, and when you don't see or can't even look long enough to sustain a look, really, how do you begin?
As
How
you
did
want
you
to,
begin? Yeah.
Would you like me to speak in that regard, or?
it's up to you. I could take, we could, if you want to start, go ahead.
No, by all means. I can't. I love. I take so much from you in terms of journey-wise in these sharings. Yeah.
So it's curious because in my life, it had to go through painful moments before it have a self-realization. I think that's what life does, is begin to amplify the pain until you begin to reflect inwards. So commensurate with the pain is the deep reflection and the willingness to look in that. And the unwillingness will begin to amp up the pain even more. That's what life does, in my view. So once you've got your attention, it's like, well, what are the steps? How do you begin to even address this? And I think in the first conversation we had, I laid out a theory where all of us as children, from even Eric Erickson, the very, very famous child psychologist, had the 7 stages of of growth for functional human beings, and I can guarantee you, most individuals don't get to that point where they're fulfilling all 7 stages. We all have to kind of revisit those circles until we, whether we get trust or mistrust or whatever that cycle is. What I'm getting at as far as self-love, the most powerful method I know, and I've talked about it in different roundtables that we have with men, is past 4 or 5 months, I've been exposed to a method called the I Love You Me method by Tara Perry. And she's got 7 very simple transformational steps. And the first step is connecting with the breath. Breath is life. The first thing that we do when we come onto this earth is we take a deep breath. And the last thing we do when we leave this earth is we release the breath. And every breath is a way of is our life. Every single, but we take it for granted. So how many of us can actually say that we breathe consciously? What do I mean by that? Every breath connects with the being, and being able to be embodied in this body. Most of us aren't even in this body, I would venture to say, because we're up here somewhere. And so for me, what it means is that as you take the breath, the ability to take it from your crown and bring it all the way down to your base. And I guarantee you, wherever you have trauma, it's going to stop. And that's where you address the trauma. And there are other processes, making decisions on how you want to move forward, starting to have an internal dialogue with the trauma, and actually feeding it what it needs. And typically, in my view and in my experience, it just needs attention. It just needs love. It just needs to be addressed. And so it could be a very simple process, or it could be a much more laborious process. But in the end, this transformational self-love, for me, it has worked and provided a lot of cleaning and clearing.
So when you're in the midst of pain that is just got you.
Yeah, I was there 3 weeks ago.
and beginning to, because reflection, you know, looking in a mirror and reflection, but the inner reflection, because what I said to this gentleman was to stay present to himself, just allow himself to feel whatever he's going to feel. whatever he's going to feel, because in that moment, crying, wherever he's, you know, he was on the floor, like, you know, he would share different things. So wherever he was, wherever his body took him, and the different ways that he was just trying to just find something that could help him in the moment, because it was just a moment to have a reprieve, because the pain, it's, you know, and so allowing ourselves to let emotions move around, let them move, and that's the whole thing. It's let them move, right? Don't try to pack it back down. Allow them to move, and so that was kind of where we started. And so with breath is also an important factor in the awareness of our breath moving through us versus the shallow shortness of breath, you know. So when you're talking about beginning and breathing, was it a simple thing to just breathe, you know? So
It's both. I think for me,
I won't say simple, but I mean, let me, because I know it's not simple. So what did it take for you to sort of sit with yourself to begin that? Let me rephrase that. Yeah.
you know what I in relation to self-love, what I would say is that because of my meditation practices, and that's a form of self-love and self-care. If people don't have some form of spiritual practices, whatever that spectrum is, I would encourage that they do. Even if you're an atheist or agnostic, there are ways to have those spiritual practices. And if you don't believe in God, that's great, but have some sort of methods that you can connect with oneself, this body. That's a spiritual practice. And so the simplicity of it, I don't know if it was simple, because pain by its nature demands attention, right? And the amplitude of the pain is directly proportional to the degree of healing you've done, in my view. And so if it's the first time you've started, you haven't addressed it before, you can expect a deep hurting, because it's saying, hey, you haven't looked at me for a while. You need to really address what's going on here, whatever trauma it is. And in that process of, you have to, in my view, I had to work through it. And that means allowing all the discomfort, all the awkwardness, all the emotions that come with that. And it's a form of anxiety. It's a form of unease. And if it unease, it becomes anxiety to the point you're having panic attacks if it doesn't get addressed. So for me, the moment that I started getting into an uneasy situation, I would find a quiet area, sit down, and close my eyes and start those deep rhythmic breathings and work through whatever emotion is becoming present at that point in time, and all that comes with that. So starting to unpack it, and where did I feel this? Why do I feel this? What does it need addressing? How can it be addressed? Is this more than one situation? Does it need, typically it's more than one situation depending on the gravity of the pain, from my experience anyways. So that's the breath from my perspective.
And I think, to speak to this real quick, is that in that moment too, it's not about trying to fix anything, right? To resolve anything, especially the the possible logistics of whatever might be, what to do, all that stuff, right? So it is being able to just be with oneself, right? How can I just be with myself and stay present to this unbearable feeling that, feels like it's taking over you, right? And to realize that it's our own love and attention and the vulnerability going into that space to sit with ourselves, to find compassion for what we're going through, is not what we're most familiar with. And especially as a man, right, depending on what you believe to begin with about yourself, about life, all of these things factor in very directly.
Or how you were raised.
Right.
I mean, depending on the era you grew up and the kind of bullshit you were fed as a guy, you're going to have different resistances, right? So young men nowadays have too much choice and don't know where that stream is, And I believe in balance, just like, when you're talking about these difficult situations, wherever you are, whether it's a breakup, whether it's drama, whether it's a conflict, it's really getting back to a point of neutrality, not positive, not negative, especially not negative, because thoughts are a piece of quantum. These are proven. Enough mental energy on these thoughts manifests your reality, especially when you put emotions associated with it. That's how reality is created, or one believes how the reality is created. So having a point of neutrality when there's an emotional effect, that's, to me, is super important, is kind of witness it the way that you're not quite engaged in it, but engaged enough that you're embodying it and making an effort to find what the lessons are there for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not making it right or wrong in that moment either. It's to just,
No, there's no judgment in any of this. I mean, that's part of what self-love is. It's just to witness it, It's to have a third person perspective. It's like you watching yourself on a movie screen and saying, wow, that's curious. What's going to happen next? We all see the movies, right? These narratives that kind of unfold, and we know if, character X does this, this is that's going to unfold. And if they do this, this is what's going to unfold. And it kind of have that kind of purview where you're witnessing yourself and all that comes with it, I think is a point of neutrality that I was trying to get at.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and it's a process. It's certainly a process. So, Ezriyah.
Yes.
Can you share some of what you've been through and how you've been able to begin to get on that path for yourself?
Can you repose the question?
About
I'll tell you what, only because I wanted to really listen to. I didn't want to be thinking of what I was going to say as he was speaking, because he gives jewels. So I just wanted to zone into his experience, which I could feel deeply. Yes.
Yeah. So at a point where the pain is so unbearable, and you have a relationship, the intimacy with one person, and you have a friendship with another. So there's different components to this breakup, right? Where betrayal is in there, trust is in there, but you still love. There's still love, definitely love, and hurt, deep hurt, and ultimately, this is physically affecting his health, right? And in a number of ways. And I had suspect that there was a huge emotional component to this. Yes. That he needed to release, right? He needed to release. But before we can even look to release, being present to it, you know, because yeah, so in that way, coming closer to ourselves instead of trying to resist it or suppress it or fight it, right?
Okay. I want to bring something into context in regards to this particular situation. So you have an individual whose heart was broken twice over, okay? Maybe more. In my experience, I've been in a situation where many paradigms at one time were broken. Luckily, I read a book that happened to speak to how people react to paradigms crashing, and I can't recall the name of it. I'd have to find it, and I'll come back and find it because I thought it was helpful, but not helpful enough, you know? Only helpful in describing my reaction versus someone else's reaction, but not in the moment. So for me, in my journey, I've been in a situation where I had the paradigm of love and also how that love was to work between myself and my wife crash. Not just we're not going to work out, but you're someone else who I totally thought you weren't at the same time. Then the paradigm of a brother who was more like a rabbi, who was more like a father to me, you know, religious wise, more than one person, that's two people in that. Then the recontextualization of the dynamic of my family and the death of my mother, estrangement of my daughter, dissolution of my concept of what it is to work, say, for the government. I won't dig deeper into that. And again, so I'll leave it at that seven. That's 7 paradigms to crash at one time. So I wanted to kill myself.
At the same time?
It was consecutively within a 3-month span.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Really 2 months. But you know, I tried to push off my acceptance of what was going on for a little bit longer so I could breathe. And so I think in my case, there was wanting to have a radical acceptance of what was going on once I decided to live, because I felt dead inside, but without me killing myself, it did not kill me. Connecting with my breath was important. Luckily, I had gone to a Vipassana. So breathing for me was a matter of not breaking down, you know, was like more like not hyperventilating to stop myself from hyperventilating or from crying profusely, regardless of who was around. Screaming was something I did, you know, learning how to move everything through, but really sitting in it was what was beneficial to me. But the hardest part was because so many things happened at one time and other people were grieving from the different aspects that I was connected to. Say, you know, did a live with one of the brothers who was in the spiritual journey with me. I won't speak to what happened on his end, but we both left at the same time. So there was that heartbreak that we shared. And then, you know, no one was with me for the heartbreak with my wife because I was the one in that relationship and I was alone in the islands with her. We just moved to another island. Same with the work. My siblings were mourning the death of my mother as well. And also looking at our family dynamic. So it was like really, really reaching out for air, not just via my lungs, but from life itself. And really finding any means to motivate myself. But not everyone can think in those kind of circumstances. And I don't know how I made it, aside from trusting in a deity, in God, you know, so to say. And even that was rocked by the end of that. And so I think when more than one thing happens to a person, most often people, if you haven't had more than one thing happen to you at a time, we tend to just think of the one thing, you know, as support. Because sometimes that one thing is so much. I'm not devaluing the one thing, but in this particular person's instance, I can definitely empathize for what it feels like and the long-lasting effects of that reality. And like being able to have some kind of tool to help you take responsibility for that unfoldment in your life. For me, I had to do that. I had to say, well, I made the choice to be with her. I made the choice to seek that religion. I made the choice to take the job. But I had to do it one small piece at a time and build up this accretion. I think that's the word that you can use. You can use it with frequency. I think you can use it in terms of like building up a discipline, because the discipline is a frequency. So to tag onto what Zissis has mentioned, and also something that we've spoken to, is finding a ritual and making that become as a spiritual practice. And this tends to be the case with men. You know, we get into something that we can do over and over again, whether it's the breath work, or whether it's a sport, or whether it's, you know, some of them aren't good. Some spiritual practices can dissolve the body. Say if we begin drinking or doing drugs or going overboard in one extreme. But finding help, as much help as you can, allowing yourself to express what's going on in every moment, and then really just like trying to get from day to day and allowing yourself to see as much good in each day as you can, until you can see a lot of good in every day. So it's been a very interesting journey on my end, but it's been well worth it. But I had to really fight hard inside to get to the point that I could see that it was worth it. It took me close to 6 months, you know. As someone who said, I came to the point where I was gonna kill myself, and I got the phone call and I thought, you guys are hurting. That's too much for you to lose me and mom at the same time. My ex-wife's not gonna care, because I'm the 4th person in her path that I come to realize has been suicidal after the breakup. I won't get into that, you know. I'm one of 2 people that I know of in my religious group that was prepared to kill themselves after all those things happened. And so it's like, okay, I'm not alone in all this. But what decision is really the best, and how can I consider other people? And my decision was, at the time, I'll just kill myself in 3 years. I'll take the rest of the time and say goodbye to everyone. You know, sew up some loose ends, maybe save some money up for my daughter so I can leave something behind for her, and get out there into the world and see what this world is about, see if I should stick around. But having that time to literally catch my breath, metaphorically catch my breath, spiritually catch my breath, emotionally catch my breath, and to have the opportunity to receive love from other people was what I needed. And so we speak to time as not existing, and I agree with Zissis. I was in a gathering the other day and someone said, let's not call it time, let's call it moving from one miracle moment to another. And even though I didn't have the words to articulate it, I had to find the miracle moment. And so having people that understood me, not in every aspect, but in a little bit, those were the miracle moments that I took hold of, until I had a bank full of miracle moments. And then I began to be able to share all the miracle moments that I've experienced with other people. But I'm not speaking from a place of theory. This is deep, you know, experience. And also, I'm not taking my experiences serious. And this is so again, I'm glad I was listening, you know, because I want to echo what Zissis has spoken to again, is being able to step out as the observer. That's not the easiest thing to do, but sometimes you get knocked down so hard that you really don't know if you're the observer or the person in it. You just feel. And so to my other brothers out there, you know, who may catch this, to maybe the women who are watching, and vice versa, you know, I think the important thing to do when you want to help a person is really try to consider the different avenues of what's going on with them. And if you can put yourself into their shoes, good. If you can't, ask them what they need, and see if you can, if you know that what they're asking for can be given to them, even if they're not asking in the way that, if they're asking for something and they're only asking for a component of what you, not being somewhat impartial, can see could benefit them, I'd give them as much of what benefits them, even if there's a little bit of allowing them to speak to what they need. You can still give that to them. And even if what they ask for is heinous in some way, you can give them the good of what they need to help them get to the point of catching their breath. So catching your breath is not a one-person job as much as I thought it was. It's a 2 people job. And I really appreciate the people who helped me catch my breath. And there are people who help me to catch my breath who don't even know. Zissis has done it at least 10 times already, and I'm sure he's not even aware. If I don't say anything, he just keep helping me catch more breaths, and so I just go with it, you know? But
this is, I mean, this is the other part that I want to address as well. Why do we as humans do not, there's a way of us being gentle with each other, right? I mean, all these things can happen. I'm not saying not to happen, but they can happen with integrity. They can happen in a way that becomes a meaningful for both parties involved. But it's usually very one-sided, very self-serving, and very almost violent in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There isn't that self-respect in that human interaction. Imagine spending, I don't know, a month, a year, 6 years, 15 years with an individual, and you formed a heart bond. And then all of a sudden, that relationship is severed in a way that becomes, I hear these stories over and over, and I'm perplexed. I mean, spent so much time energetically together and being gentle with each other as you uncouple, as you begin to go your way, makes sense to me. I mean, I think that should be the way moving forward. I guarantee you there wouldn't be that many divorce lawyers involved. I guarantee you there wouldn't be that many psychiatrists or therapists involved if we had the tools or the cognizance or the self-respect for each other to say, you know what? I care about you just as much as I care about myself. So how can we make this work? That you are nourished and uncouple as we uncouple. And I think that's something that should be meaningfully discussed in part of relationship formations, right? These are the conversations I think you have at the front of a relationship.
And this is something that doesn't happen. You know what I feel that you're speaking to, brother, also, is a word that I think we have the word respect. Okay, we'll throw trust in there, two of those things that are built upon, even though you can give someone trust and they can detract from that. And then there's the word dignity. And dignity is quite often at the crux of something that we have a dearth of inside, and also something that you can give to another person, you know, but often we don't know to, or we don't do that. And that in the beginning of a relationship, I think is very important. That's, I think, made all the difference in how I've navigated. Even before I had the word in mind, there was something that I wanted to accord to my partner and accord to the way that we work in relationship, that if things fell apart, at least on my end, I could still hold my head high and say, well, I didn't remove that from you. And so I'm going to make sure that I don't lose that on my own, or navigating and how to really assess that. And we'll say, I'll define it as just being in touch with the innate value, as much of the value as I have just for breathing and being around, and not trying to remove that from another person as a common bond.
Right.
And so when you have dignity, or you want to protect and honor the dignity of another person, there's no way that you can assault them, because they're connected to you deeply. So I have more compassion for those who have treated me with no dignity, because what I'm getting to witness is a severance from themselves that I probably won't be around to fix based on what happened, but I can sure reassess mine.
Yeah.
And speak to it more.
And it's the other thing too, Deborah, I'm finding is the intention of coupling, right? You know, most men and women, when they couple, whether it's, you know, very early on in their teens and they're starting on dates, and as you mature and you're looking for a life partner, you know, if you haven't completed your self-love exercise, meaning loving yourself completely, meaning you don't need anyone to validate you in that beautiful way, then you're magnetizing what you need just by definition, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So whatever I'm lacking, I'm going to magnetize. That's a gift. I see that as a gift.
Beautiful.
Change the lens a little.
Yeah.
Because they come into our lives and they become a reflection, a projection of your wounds in a way that you can see it and notice the pain, because otherwise it becomes your blind spot.
I agree with you. And I'll give it to all those folks that I mentioned in the previous thing. I couldn't have asked for a better catalyst for growth. And just trying in the smallest way possible to change my lens and see the light at the end of the tunnel was, again, it becomes cumulative if you can just keep it out. And this is what we're going to teach young men moving forward. This is why we're getting together, to recognize what we didn't have, and give them that guidance that they were asking for through our experience.
Wow, so there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And one of the first things I would say is also asking for help. Like, it's important that when someone's struggling to that degree, that they ask for help in some, like, because I think there's hesitation and judgment from oneself, or embarrassment or shame, that people hold back from asking for help, to be seen in this way, right? And so that's an important piece right there, to make it okay to ask for help. And the other thing you said, Ezriyah, and that ties in with the moment, is acceptance, right? So acceptance, radical acceptance, because you're dealing in that moment with something that is so overtaking, right? That it's, just landing somewhere, anywhere. Just so acceptance is part of the ownership that we take to begin a healing process, is to recognize that this is our life, right? This is my life. And then I take responsibility. And acceptance doesn't mean I like what's happening. Mm-hmm. Acceptance just means I'm here. And that alone, calling yourself present, is a beginning. It's a huge beginning, because we're everywhere except here. We're trying to escape, right? We're trying to numb, for all the different ways that people can choose to numb. And so drawing ourselves present will also come through the breath, because our breath brings us present, right? And in those moments, and these are, and again, talk about, these are simple. This is a strategy that's verbalized, and it sounds like, okay, this can be simple when you just say it, but in the moment, right? It doesn't feel so simple, but truly, when we wear ourselves out, and then the catching of the breath, anything, it is to just be there, just allow ourselves to be there. And I think when we talk about other people, like blame, because we blame, we project, and you're right, Z, is that, we have people come into our lives that are to help us to grow. Mm-hmm. Except in the moment, when we're in that moment, we're not thinking about growing, right? So the tendency to blame and to project and deflect, but we're triggered. We can be deeply triggered, and the unresolved wounds of our own wounds and others' wounds does provide a reflection, and can be absolutely catalytic for us to begin to explore. And that has absolutely, doesn't even have to do with a relationship breakup. We're just talking about people in general who cross our path, right? And so that component, but when we're into this deeper place, when everything gets completely like disrupted, and we don't know what matters, and like we are lost in the meaning of life. Like, what is this all about? Because now, if we feel that life has lost all its meaning based on a loss of some sort, a relationship, right? That we have to somehow find ourselves where we can have this acknowledgement of our worth, of our value, our innate value, by being right where we are. And less is more is what I've learned also, is that because if not trying to do something, it's just honestly just be, because in these moments it's exhaustive, and people aren't sleeping oftentimes, or so there's so many of these in crisis mode that we have to trim it down to the simplest thing that will allow us to begin. And then there's a continuum, as a lot of, what we're talking about is the going into understanding why we get into things, and so and the care that, and the honor, and all this that comes with relationships, knowing that it's our self-honor, our own self-care, right? That is this relationship that we start with and bring it into everything else and into every relationship, right? So you guys touched on so much. Wow, I was trying to oh yeah, good stuff.
I just want to add something.
Okay.
After my first divorce, within months I had cancer. Testicular cancer. After my second divorce, and this was even after traveling, came back. The first time I did a certain type of healing, which was Western medicine. The second time I used more indigenous practices to heal. I benefited from both of them, because these, I believe, were parts of me suppressing things. So they were a catalyst to release the things that I was suppressing, not only from my relationship with my mother, but also, if you can believe it, lineal things that needed to be cleansed. And I was the catalyst and also the conduit for that kind of cleansing, which will not be passed on if I procreate again. But also, I can help the women in my family, which I've, quote unquote, coronated two of the matriarchs in my family from what I learned in my journey, and maybe begun to change the way that they're going to roll. So like the ripple effect of what seemed to be the hardest, most unfathomable, unbelievable things that I wrote into my story, and having made it through that part of the journey, has created something really beautiful that changes the hopefully the timeline, or the miracle point expressions of my family's journey. And so I have empathy for people who are suppressing, because I watched it in 2 generations. Me becoming, the third, and then maybe making it, taking a turn for the better. So all these things that we go through, I just, want to put it out there. One, we are all on a journey together. And 2, there are lessons in all of these events. And so the question I keep asking myself is, how can I take the lesson from this event and benefit someone else from it? Because the components of other people's lessons will help me, thinking about, there's a book called Emotional BS, and a book on 16 traits of personality. I forget the authors. I want to say Eric, the same Eric, not Eric Erickson, but possibly, who speaks about like operating from the adult, the child, and maybe the adolescent form of your being in regards to ego. But like I had to call on all those things to check myself once I began to accept what was going on. So it was never a group effort for me to make it, or a solo effort for me to make it from the get-go, except for using will and choice. Besides those 2, everything else I needed.
You said will?
Yeah, having the will to say that I have a choice to make, and now also coming back to that choice and intention as much as I could, even when I didn't do it 100%, but 10% was enough, right? Just like you put 10% away long enough, you have a little something in the bank. And I think it works in many different applications.
Deborah, I think as you're talking about acceptance, I'm kind of thinking prior to acceptance, you have to acknowledge that this is happening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because in the form of acknowledgement, you are accepting after that.
Yeah.
So real quick on that, so acknowledgement, because here's the question that people will ask is why is this happening? Why me? Like that question, which is can be looked at as an acknowledgement, but it's the acknowledgement that kind of doesn't have an attachment, like the the recognition that this is happening in me, something's happening in me, versus the why me? Why is this happening to me? Right? And not looking at what's happening for me, right? So these are distinctions that can drop in to one's awareness, you know.
I mean, I can take this to the extreme.
I'm gonna turn on light.
There's a book called Deep Survival. I forget the author's name, but Deep Survival talks about the difference between when you get into crisis moments, life and death moments. What does it take to not die, essentially? And he's got many stories where you've got trained professionals that keep their life because they're not in the present moment and acknowledging what that is. I.e., for example, there's a story about rafting in the canyons, and you've got these experts that have done this for years, right? And they're in the middle of a situation, and they're in that thick of the thick of things, and they're not acknowledging the present, staying calm, removing the neutrality, and making decisions from that as opposed to panicking. I mean, that's an extreme situation, but the questions of why is it happening to me, that's an integrated process things down the road. The point that I'm trying to get is, I'm in the water. Okay, I'm in the water. What do I do now? I got to swim, right? Or I got to get on my back, or I gotta look for something that keeps me alive or keeps me moving, or you know what I'm saying? You have to acknowledge where you are before you can take the next steps.
Yeah.
There's a book that I read. I believe it's called, and let me see if I can put my eyes on it real quick because I keep it close to me. It's called, and forgive the curse word, we'll just say Emotional BS. And the author's name is Carl Alasko, PhD. In the book, I bought it in the two relationships, one relationship before my previous ex-wife, and I had it, and I kind of skimmed over it, but I didn't go back to it. And oddly enough, it was just sitting on my desk, and it became something that I read every day after work between my studies and my sobbing. And the book speaks to three things that get us in a lot of trouble, called the toxic trio. You've got denial, delusion, and then blame. Essentially, and this is the reason why triage is important to me, you know, is you somehow, whatever situation you're in, if it's not beneficial, you likely at some point denied an essential fact that was presented to you. And then if you're in denial of that fact and you don't catch it, you begin to delude yourself. You fall into a delusion. And whenever you're in delusion, the next thing that you do is blame. So you never get to the important fact. So recognizing and saying, okay, what am I denying about this situation? What did I deny before? Empowered me to take responsibility. And then I started to look for how I deluded myself, which is quite present. You know, it was in my face because I thought I was in this situation, the paradigm crashed. And then the blame. Well, I can't blame. She had actions, but I put myself in the situation. So let me take responsibility for this. And the next step for me was figuring out what was beneficial for me. You know, because in the book it details like, what are your core principles? What are your core needs? And how do I get back to that? And so that's what I focused on, my core needs and my core principles, figuring out what they were, you know, and then going after that, like a hawk, a hungry hawk, flying after a mouse. Too bad they're not vegetarians, but whatever. So yeah, I like mice too. And this is something I return to time and time again. This is something I use in assessment when I do the soul sessions. You know, simple. I needed simple to help me get there, and sometimes simple is the best. So triage, acknowledging, acceptance. What am I going to do next? Finding ways to empower yourself, finding ways to take responsibility, to see what's really happening, and then to take action and to breathe along the way. It sounds like a really good, cliff notes to surviving any hazardous thing that's unfolded.
And if you were to distill it even further, it's to its simplest step is just keep moving forward, no matter
just
how
keep moving.
You're
Rah, as the Haitians say.
Yes, yes, exactly. Just keep moving forward, because I've been in my life where the gravity was so intense where I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I was in so much pain. And the voice in my head is, just take a step. However small it is, it's a win for today. And just be gentle.
Right.
That's it. And if people are, depending on where they are on the spectrum, Deborah, right? And if you got the willingness to tackle it and do all the self-assessment and acknowledge and accept, great, all the power to you. But if you're in that deep state of pain, feeling, we as men surrender. Emotional intelligence is something most men are good at. That's a generality speaking, but most men aren't. And acknowledging the emotion, surrendering to those emotions is the work, right? And that's amazing as far as I'm concerned. That's a gift. Just sitting in place and saying, okay, I'm feeling anger. Why am I feeling anger? I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling whatever that is, right? Acknowledging that and working through that. There's only one way to go, and that's it.
And let me just add, emotional intelligence is a capacity building thing.
Yeah.
Poetry's helped because it's benefited me in exposing me to different words like ennui, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, or like melancholy, and like, oh, that's what I was feeling. And so it's been a really good thing as a man to begin to be able to put my fingers on what I was feeling. Prior to that, like I've said so many times, I felt like I had the emotional IQ of a 3-year-old, and maybe they were further advanced than me. I just would get mad and want to smash, like Hulk, and I can't smash. If I smash, I go to jail, I'll be smashed. So it's like, can be a very stressful situation, but being able to put words to what's going on is a liberating thing for men, for all beings. But certainly I think it's been something where I've seen a lot of change in men, because in my relationships, as I've been able to articulate my feelings, it's made all the difference.
And it's in that, sorry, Deborah, it's in that expression that you begin to unshackle and unburden yourself, because it's those emotions that enslave us, right? When you utter the words, I feel angry, and here's the reason why I feel angry, and actually vocalize them and allow that, whatever that emotion is, and a guttural feeling, projected out. And it's a way of release, right?
Yeah.
That's part of some of the psychotherapeutic work in, I forget the psychiatrist's name now, but the Gestalt work.
Yeah, giving voice to your feelings, the intangible nature of our life is where we live. Really, we live in the feeling. We're alive in the feeling. However, when we're going through this kind of experience and choosing to do the work, like you said, surrender. Surrender is a dropping in, and it's an allowance in itself. It's to let go, right? It's to to be. And there's nothing weak, because sometimes we're always in the I gotta do something. I gotta do. What is it to do? This in this moment, be here, right now, be now, like here. And when it's so overwhelming, you know, just that moment, that second is like, just get me through. Get me through. And so, you know, all these, you know, up and down to articulate what that is. And the words, the rhythm is what I was coming through when talking about poetry. You know, there's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to life. There's the sound of our voice, the tonality, the resonance, right? This is all part of life's rhythm. You know, music, things that we enjoy. That's why it's so important what we listen to, right?
Yeah. You're right.
And what we say to ourselves, because there's vibration, there's frequency in the words that we're choosing. And again, this comes with more awareness as we go along, but you know, this is an important realization that we make a choice, we take responsibility. It's free will, you know, and what we believe matters. And to be gentle with ourselves. Yeah.
And with others.
And with others. Right. And so when we don't know what to do and we lose control and we lose physical control, where there's actions that are taken that are violating, that are harmful, hurtful, either to oneself or to another, you know, this is still this gets intertwined, entangled when we're trying to figure things out in the moment that we don't know what to do, right? And so the thing to do becomes reactive versus responsive. So between a reaction and a response is a pause, which is the breath. That's where the breath is, like that moment is critical. That moment makes a difference, that little moment.
Yeah.
You know? Wow, you guys are, this is important. It's such an important conversation, and for anyone to listen to, and especially for men though, who want to provide and seek to protect and you know, take charge, that this is a take charge.
Well,
this is take charge, and it's your greatest challenge, is to go within, right?
I think we're getting into the age of empowerment, Deborah. I think this is where we're getting at. This is because we've been so disempowered as human beings under the illusion of free will and empowerment and all the nonsense that has been spewed out and programmed in our lives. Do we actually have true empowerment? That's really my question. What does that look like, right? Because if we were truly empowered, I wouldn't need another individual to validate me, right? I would be magnetizing the individuals in harmonic resonance with what my energy is as a complete sovereign being, right? So what does that look like?
We're going to you better hold on to that one. Yeah, so you guys, it's wonderful that you guys work with men, you have conversations with men, and again, it's important that people realize that it's ask for help, you know, and it's okay to ask for help. That's That's a must. And then having groups and, and support where you don't feel so alone. You recognize that you're not alone. And you guys are able to offer sort of a space, right, for men to gather. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're in the early stages right now. Ezriyah, myself, Brendan, Michael, few men right now. We're in the early stages of creating a healing circle for men, digital healing circle. What we hope that down the road it would be locally, and we can have more men engaged in that. And that's not exclusive to men, but there's certain specifics that within men's group. Let's not talk about I don't know if you remember the Orange movement in the 90s. Nothing like that, something like that. It's all about taking it to the next level and really have a circle of trust, empowerment, and other men challenging other men, because accountability is something that accountability and integrity is something that I lead with in my life, but I haven't seen it I've seen it very sporadic, not as consistent with other men. Obviously, the circle that we have with Ezriyah and Michael, I mean, these guys are incredible as far as I'm concerned, and our harmonic resonance with what we're all doing. But as far as other men goes, it'd be incredible that we could all lead by example in that way. So early stages, people can go back to the website or the YouTube page, Elevate Me Academy. We've got a whole bunch of Divine Masculine roundtables right now. I think we just finished the 11th. And there'll be more information there, and we'll hope to have a website at some point as well as we sketch out all the particulars.
Great. Great. Yeah. Elevate Me Academy. Okay. Well, I want us to, I think there's another conversation that can go a little bit deeper here. We got to make things digestible.
Yeah.
Right? I appreciate you gentlemen very much. And because we are at a point in time, and there's energies are moving. There's a lot of energies moving, and
paradigms are collapsing.
There's a lot of things happening here. So aligning ourselves with, and choosing to grow inward, to become more aware and to recognize who we are at our core, like who we really are, right? And
I don't think you have a choice anymore. I don't have the luxury of time anymore.
Well, that's conscious. You're conscious to say that.
Right.
So it's still a choice to.
So you can evolve. You can't stay the same, or you can devolve. And however it looks like to you, we're always moving forward. We're always evolving. Even if it seems so infinitesimal that we're standing still, it's just incrementally we're evolving. We're always evolving.
I personally feel things are disrupting for me in a way that's positive. But like I had mentioned before, all the things that I kind of had put to the side, kind of I'll get to that, or it's all like right here, right now, and my sleep is letting me know. So my sleep, this is a thing when you can be awake and think about things, but then when your sleep is waking you to remind you that there's unfinished business.
So what's true then? Your sleep or your wakefulness?
It's all true, because you know what I have truly learned to pay attention, and so I can I can laugh at this, although it's not funny, because it requires some things that feel very unnerving, because I have learned to endure and adapt really well, really well. And now it's to allow for the change, for whatever that change will look like. You know, that no longer, this way no longer serves me, right? And yeah, so it's an interesting thing when, you know, at all points in time, like it's complete disruption. So it's all perfect. it's perfect, and I accept that. And so it is the paying attention. It's witnessing my own process and giving myself permission to feel whatever I feel, and to be mindful of the state, my vibrational state. Because as a practitioner, I'm bringing myself into situations to help lift and to help provide insight.
Absolutely.
And it requires me to be present to myself, to be effective, positively effective. So anyway, so we'll have another conversation, take it a little further. And Ezriyah, is there a place folks can find you as well? Because I think you...
Yes, certainly. So easily you can find me at Epic, that's EPIC _ Ezriyah, EZRIYAH. This is Instagram. On Facebook, it's Ezriyah Ben Ernst, just like my name, EZRIYAH. Ben, BEN, Ernst, ERNST, and that's on Facebook. And then if you want to know in more detail about what I do, what I'm into, you can certainly find me at www.lokoji, that's LOCOJI.com. And again, Lokoji stands for Love, Courage, Justice, and Experiential Integration, which is essentially what we keep running into in these conversations. So take a look at the site, run through it, and I'm trying to chock it full of things that are beneficial for you.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. Is there any other location?
Yeah, I've got an Instagram account, and you can follow the all lowercase dot wise one, WIZE1 number one, the wise one.
Say that again. There was a blank out.
There, the wise one. So THE dot WIZE number one.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that you folks who have been listening have found some value from these gentlemen, from our conversation, and, you know, reach out and make it okay to ask for help, and know that you have a choice, and know that you're not alone. So you can connect with me. I'm Dr. Deb Howell at Facebook, and Dose of Deborah on Instagram, and the podcast is also Dose of Deborah, Rehab for the Heart. So I thank you all. I thank you, gentlemen, and we shall get together again. And let me...
Aloha.
Aloha. Yes.